Hey folks, and welcome to the Daily Ratings Podcast. It's a show where each week we'll sit down with Vincent Daly to get his thoughts on the latest movies he's been watching, both older films and new releases. And don't worry, there's no spoilers. Vince will give a brief review of the movie, share some thoughts, and of course, then rate the film. The daily ratings are always fair, honest, and most importantly, they're consistent. On today's show, Vince will be rating and reviewing Texas Chainsaw Massacre, directed by Tobe Hooper. We have Jacob's Ladder by Adrian Lyne. The Cabin in the Woods by Drew Goddard. And then we have newly released Saw 10 by Kevin Greutert. And The Exorcist Believer, directed by David Gordon Green. It's going to be a great October episode here, folks, so stay tuned and enjoy. Mr. Vincent Daly, how we doing, buddy?
Tell me, boy, how's it going?
It's going okay for me. Yeah, this looks like a normal October week that I'm used to around
right,
here.
We've been all over the place in October. Continually to be all over the place in October.
I texted you earlier in the week, and I thought this was a good... I kind of like this list.
Oh, I loved watching this week, even with, not to give away the goat, but, there's some spotty reception of the new Exorcist. So
I know. At first I heard great... No, I'm sorry. I only heard bad things about it.
Yeah.
It was Saw 10 that I've actually heard some decent comments about.
Right. I think fans of that franchise were kind of clamoring for something a little bit more, which...
Okay, we'll see. We'll see how it fared.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we have the classic 1974 Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And Jacob's Ladder, it was the only one I wasn't really familiar with on the list. Because The Cabin in the Woods, I have heard from other people and you in the past that all of a sudden this one kind of came, and it's actually a pretty decent movie I had heard about. So
yeah, Cabin in the Woods was something that we mentioned a lot more on earlier episodes of the podcast.
I think you have, yeah.
I can't remember what episodes they were, though. So folks at home, if you're listening, maybe if you could tell me which ones, if you have it off the top of your head without going through each of the horror reviews. I think it might have been brought up in the Evil Dead reviews. I'm not sure.
It had to be the early ones, I think, because technically the podcast hasn't even been out for 2 years, but we have 3 Octobers under our belt, I believe.
Yes.
And that's because we came loaded with like 20 eps.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm excited to hear about The Cabin in the Woods, because you and I have actually not spoken about it. Was it on the master list?
No, actually. That's another thing that
really weird.
I just kind of assumed it was rated.
Okay.
So and I like those.
Yeah,
know.
I'm glad we covered that then. Okay,
Yeah.
But let's jump back to 1974, because this is kind of a start of a genre. At least that's what I kind of know it to be.
100%.
This is the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, directed by Tobe Hooper. Vin, how did you enjoy it?
Well, when it comes to horror icons, there is a long list of monsters that probably come to mind for you folks, but as far as horror titles go, few stand out as much as this movie. Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I mean, the brutal cadence of this name feels almost destined to be one of the most famous horror movies ever made. And if I was going to skip the original Exorcist and Saw this week, I needed a heavy hitter. And that heavy hitter had to come out as, without a doubt, one of the most famous horror films, something that sprinkles many all-time greats, top 10 type of lists online, and legitimately something that I've never seen before. So I was very excited.
Oh,
for
really?
that.
You never saw this one?
No. I think I might have closed my eyes through watching the 2000s remake as a kid.
It was an 03 one, I think.
Yeah.
Was there are there like... I get kind of confused with the name because it's not like there was a 2003 one and it was just called the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, correct?
Right, yeah.
It just took the same name.
Oh, yeah.
Were there others since then too?
I don't think so. I think there are sequels, but they're done as very much B movies, just kind of using it. I don't really know this to be like a franchise that you got to do your series homework on or anything like that.
Gotcha.
So,
okay. It's not like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, brand new chain or something.
Brand new, sharpen the axe. No.
Okay, cool.
And as I'll probably bring up on a few reviews here, was not into watching all the Exorcists and all the Saw movies. Certainly not 10 Saw movies. So, only when cinematically necessary. That's going to be my new phrase.
We'll give you the pass on that one. That's all right.
Yeah. This film is no stranger to many all-time great lists, like I said, but it lands on the list on those lists with a fraction of the budget. This movie was made for less than $140K at the time, and while I usually don't touch on aspects like this in my reviews, I feel it's important to note with so much dialogue this year around movies not making their money back, horror movies, mid-budget movies being successful. I think it's just amazing that when you watch this movie, it's able to achieve so much atmosphere and so much horror at, I think the converted budget for this is like $800K all said and done or something like that. I mean, it's amazing. It really is like one of those indie gems that is timeless and the budget doesn't translate to the quality whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, even though it was for 50 years.
Oh yeah,
right.
Yeah.
49 years.
Yeah,
104,000. It's still not a lot at all back then.
Right.
Still not a lot at all.
Yeah, and most of it, I believe, came from the editing process that was extended. Which once again, well worth it because I think the editing, believe it or not, is a highlight of this film.
Oh, really?
Despite even being low on the budget end as well, despite it taking up some of the pie of the budget. I think not to mention here 2023 being a landmark year for horror, which I say in complete honesty, folks, almost every scary movie to come out this year could learn something from this, especially our two new slots this week. Texas Chainsaw Massacre centers on a group of hippies mid-road trip down south on a sweltering hot summer day. The further they get, the further society is in their rearview mirror. Calling their surroundings rural doesn't really even come close here. And this is reinforced with every hick weirdo they find. You wouldn't know it, but the local flavor is blood, as this group of teens quickly spirals into a psychotic hell at the end of a whirring chainsaw. For the cinema history nerds out there, you could easily call this one of the first, if not the first, slasher movie. I'm assuming that's what you were kind of referring to earlier, saying that
definitely.
This is a genre starter.
Yeah.
Flashback to 1974, and this was pre-Halloween, pre-Friday the 13th, or anything in this subgenre. And actually what I found is the term used back then was splatter film.
Ooh, I kind of like that.
I know, and I think it's an important little small distinction to it.
I like that. I really didn't know about that.
Yeah.
Wow, we should bring that back.
I think splatter film might have started in the UK because I saw that it was connected to the video nasties when they started calling films illegal to watch and whatnot if they were too much. But yeah, let me tell you, I like that term a lot more for some reason. Slasher for me is paired with these horror icons: Myers, Jason, Freddy. And while many fans adore Leatherface in this film as our chainsaw wielding mascot, the fear conjured in this movie is so much more environmental and distinct. And I think that's where I'm kind of coming away with liking the small but maybe even useless distinction of a splatter movie for this. This is a fantastic movie because it captures and amplifies the Southern grotesque or Southern Gothic to it. Folks, for any unfamiliar with the term, this is when stylistically the run-down or rural aspects of the South are emphasized. Now, it doesn't always have to be for horror. If anything, a great example is season 1 of True Detective. Easily my running running title holder of favorite piece of TV, which I don't really have a huge leg to stand on.
No, but at least it's that's respectable.
Yeah. Right. I think it's a safe choice. Pretty universally praised. This movie, however, it plans to use all of that Southern Gothic, all of that Southern decay for its horror. Themes of decay, disturbing, eccentric characters, poverty, and of course lawlessness. Tom, you ever walk into one of those butchers and you're just assaulted with the smell of smoke and meat and sweat?
Okay, I mean,
No,
I mean, I walked into a butcher or two before, but it's not.
Oh, I mean, there is a butcher that we both know. I don't want to dox ourselves, right? Not trying to dox us,
but it's got a
There's
smell.
a local butcher that when you walk in, you're kind of just assaulted with this atmosphere.
Yeah, maybe that's every butcher too. There's a coldness, a rawness to it, quite literally. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. When it comes down to it, that sensory overload, that is what perfectly describes this movie.
Oh, I like that.
This movie...
Sorry, I walked all over the metaphor.
Again, listen, I know you know this butcher I'm talking about.
I think I know what you're talking about.
Apparently not. But, that sensory overload, that's what this film really, just reeks of.
Yeah.
It reeks of a hot, disgusting summer day, and against all of my expectations is really the best part about the horror. The best part about the horror is oddly not the chainsaw or the massacre or anything like that. It's really how everything is kind of built up to be a deeply disturbing experience for characters and really anyone.
Yeah, it's a feeling evoked through the screen.
Yeah.
That you're picking up on, which is great.
Yeah. I mean, I was really, really impressed with it. It's honestly shocking how much the scare is based on building this atmosphere, too. Despite the title's intentions, some of the scary stuff is in the establishing moments. A good example are just the many unnerving shots of creepy scenes and sights along the way. A nest of spiders just like spilling over, random teeth and bone that you just automatically wonder, hey, how'd that teeth get there? I don't know. Whose teeth are those? These scenes are handled without any spike in tension and are unsettling because we are only left with our imagination to seek for answers. If anything, this movie is textbook example of how not to do jump scares, and the few that are thrown in are stylistically tied to the sound of a chainsaw. Again, I think that kind of even reinforced this atmospheric horror. There's really no jump scares in the way that we know jump scares in kind of a modern film landscape.
I think that's cool, though.
Yeah.
I think, and funny, 49 years later, kind of refreshing to be back at the simplicity of this kind of.
Absolutely.
As you were saying, talking about the beginning, and even though there wasn't necessarily anything truly scary on film, but it's building that feeling, that reminds me, just you talking, it's like, oh, maybe this is like the first 15, 20 minutes of Deliverance, kind of.
Sure.
Where you're immediately kind of just unsettled.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think, it's very important to kind of recognize Deliverance coming out in 1972, 2 years later, that same kind of concept of fear of lawlessness, fear of
South and openness.
Yeah, and openness and no help in sight and no civilization. I don't know for sure as far as an inspirations for the director, but definitely feels in line that it takes those concepts that we see in Deliverance 2 years later, clocks it to a full horror.
Yeah.
And is so great for that reason. The editing in this film is a standout, like I said, and kind of despite still a low budget with this, for being an indie production for the time, I think it's very impressive. My praise here is equally for creative cuts, but also the restraint in certain scenes. We see both sides of this in the main chase with Leatherface. As Marilyn Burns is running up the stairs, we clip back and forth between a chainsaw cutting down the door and her scrambling up further. And this plays with a cool time dilation that makes your hairs stand up, not knowing when that door is going to break down. And time dilation is another editing trick that we previously loved when we covered The Wild Bunch as well. It's just a simple but an amplifying trick to it. And even thinking back to that scene, there's really nothing spectacular around him cutting through the door and cutting back and forth to her running up. But if anything, it takes such a long time for her to get up the stairs. You just never know when that chainsaw is going to be right behind him.
Right.
And I feel like that conjures such a good horror for anyone that has run up after turning off the lights from the basement. And, you're trying to get away from it. It's on your heels. It captures that so perfectly. There's also certain parts of the chase that are left entirely unedited. My favorite being a long-range shot of the house with our characters' silhouettes growing as they come towards us. Just iconic in a great way, and again, just sold the fear in such a fundamental, primal way that anyone getting chased at any point in their life can kind of, it conjures the same feelings.
Right.
Folks, I gotta say, this is a scary movie for many reasons, and like I started off, even the name itself strikes fear just saying it. But for me, the fear worked as a nightmare amplified version of a great 70s film, like we talked about already, 1972's Deliverance. On the surface, you might say these two films are alike because of Psycho Hicks, but I think it's much more than that. I think it's that the fear lies in true isolation, a fear without consequence or laws or morals, far away from any help, and far away from judging eyes, and as a horror under those circumstances can reflect the darkest pit of what man is capable of. This film was originally marked as being based off of true events and partially inspired by real psychopaths like Ed Gein. So believe me when I say the authentic dread that you experience watching this film is what makes it an all-time great. I had a wonderful time watching this film. Wow. This is without a doubt the best of the horror season. We're giving Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1974 a well-deserved 86.
Whoa!
A must-watch.
You surprised me on that one big time. I can't believe you liked it that much. I thought there must have been some sort of age dripping off of it or something.
I'm surprised I didn't have more gripes with it. I feel like it's so cut down to the bone. I mean, it is exactly what you want, to the point.
Man, that's unbelievable.
Yeah.
And it's an hour and 23 minutes.
Oh, right. I know. Just an absolute delight. I'm telling you.
86%.
I'm telling you. It is a must-watch. It is, honestly, in looking back at what I could have covered this week, mainly Exorcist 1 as a peer must-watch. I really did want a heavy hitter, and not that I was going in looking for that, but more so something that I realized as the film went on and as I went for a rewatch again. Again, my mark is that if I am within an already busy week,
that's true.
Making out of my own time to go back and watch something again. I mean, that's the mark that I know. So
86% for Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Wow.
Great movie.
I'm happy for you. Yeah, that's fantastic. Jeez, I don't know if we're going to be able to reach that again here in a little while.
Yeah.
I didn't know that it was based on some true events, though.
Yeah, the original marketing of the film, it said based off of a true story. That's really not the case, but there's a lot of parallels between the Hick family we interact with and a real-life serial killer from the 50s named Ed Gein.
Okay. Same kind of deal, like dismemberment or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, that's I'll leave it for the true crime podcasts out there. But yeah, Ed Gein was someone that, as far as kind of a psycho craze, really captured a lot of attention for that reason. Apparently, as well, Ed Gein has some slight inspiration to Hitchcock's original Psycho in 1960 as well.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Who is the put the lotion in the basket guy? Is he based on the Texas Chainsaw Massacre a little bit?
Possibly, maybe being a little bit backwards. I wouldn't know too much.
Okay.
I mean, I
certainly don't know. Okay, all right. So we'll keep on going here. Let's jump to 1986. Great, Finn.
Oh,
Great.
Yeah.
Fantastic. It almost makes me want to watch it.
Almost.
All right, so we're jumping to 1990. This is Jacob's Ladder, directed by Adrian Lin. And why don't you get into this a little bit? Why this one? Or am I just a little ignorant on this one?
No. Jacob's Ladder is definitely kind of an oddball pick.
Okay.
This was on my list forever as one of my buddies, Jesse, he says that it is one of his favorite horror films.
Oh, wow. All right.
So again, just kind of chipping away through the many movie lists that I have. What I'll say is I would like to start with saying that this is a horror that comes from the writer of Stuart Little 2.
Stuart Little 2.
And man, I just love that so much. That really just made my week. Just finding out that among the many things he's written, Stuart Little 2 is in there. That's just great. He also did Ghosts with Swayze the very same year in 1990. So
wow.
This is a big year for our guy. This is a cerebral lead role for Tim Robinson. Last time we covered him, he was playing a dumb jock in Bull Durham. So I want to start out with highlighting some performance because this is no average horror movie and really could be seen as a psychological drama just as equally. This also comes from director Adrian Lyne, who I can't say will be returning to anytime soon, folks, but he definitely has some notable works, maybe most notably Fatal Attraction, that we might return to at some point, but who knows? No director study on Lynn. We start our story in Vietnam with a near-death experience for Jacob Singer, but his trauma starts even earlier than that. In a stream of unconscious storytelling, we weave together the pieces of his current life in 70s New York, but his existence is a feverish scramble, a real nightmare as he suffers from abstract and disturbing delusions. These delusions start to overlap with the experience of his old squad members, and that forces him to unravel what this nightmare really means. It's almost like a conspiracy horror in a lot of ways. Not as a knock, but it was honestly my gut feeling. It almost feels like something that Nick Cage would pick up. Just how cerebral it is.
Sure, yeah.
The way that Jacob experiences jump around really sells the psychological aspects here. The movie will bob in and out of sanity fueled by his PTSD from the war. This is, of course, shown through horror concepts, but also socially in how strange and hostile the world around him is. And let me tell you, the atmosphere created by this is horrifying at times. The nightmare that creeps into Jacob's reality is disturbing in ways jump scares could never achieve. It's honestly so shocking sometimes that when something scary is shown, it feels like a jump scare because you just have such a visual experience to it. Mm-hmm. I want to give some serious praise here on this note. These kind of hellish manifestations of his mind and how they torture our characters is very close to the video game masterpiece Silent Hill 2. On the surface level, both share a love for kind of distorted faces that are smeared into not having any kind of recognition and to be blank, and also sped up movements in the edit to give kind of an unholy speed to them jerking around on screen. This movie doesn't reach the heights in the scares of Silent Hill 2, but is very similar in its psychological deconstruction of our characters and how that is used against them and ultimately where the story goes.
Okay.
And I will say Silent Hill 2 specifically. Silent Hill, you hear it, you think of maybe, oh no.
I know the word silent.
Maybe I forgot how much you weren't into horror, Tom.
Or video games. I know the names.
Yeah. But Silent Hill kind of gets perverted as far as the original concept. 2 is the Holy Grail, and it's because of this kind of psychological deconstruction.
Okay.
And Jacob's Ladder absolutely resembles that.
By the way, it's just tangent. Silent Hill 2, was that kind of new? Or is that old? Okay.
Old? PT, though.
Yeah, I don't consider that old, though.
Yeah, but that's Silent Hills. That was PT was a playable teaser that Kojima did.
That's right. Oh, and Silent Hill.
It was meant to be Silent Hill, kind of a reboot for it.
Yeah, wasn't that in production hell?
Yeah, definitely a casualty of Kojima splitting away from his company.
Oh, and that was the first one?
No, that
was going to be Silent Hill 2.
That was like a reboot, like a hype machine, basically, for a reboot of the franchise.
So Silent Hill 2 is old then?
Yes.
Like way before
like
that.
PS2.
Okay, I got you.
He's following.
Well, PT was, I mean, that gets you.
Right. But honestly...
Stay tuned for our video game podcast.
Yeah,
a lot of good content. I'm just as clueless. Don't worry.
You stand along with it. You stand along. I really would be curious if you dive into any of the horrors we covered this month. I
think for my birthday month, I'll do all horrors that you haven't seen yet.
Okay, all right, there we go.
It won't be. I have 5 ideas.
Casper?
You got 5 ideas on the table, by the way, for that.
You're already locked and loaded.
Yeah.
It's great.
Anyway, back to
Jacob's Ladder. Enough of a tangent. I would say, sadly, on the note of how scary the film actually gets, that's where it gets knocked down a bit for me. Without covering spoilers, I do like the ending of this movie, but I could totally get why someone would get a bit frustrated with this. About halfway into the film, Jacob goes from being a helpless victim to the nightmares around him to start to find some breadcrumbs, breadcrumb clues, some red herrings as well, of how to decipher the mystery around him. And this is where I'm coming from and saying, like, this is almost like a conspiracy type of horror in a lot of ways. And also a psychological drama more than a horror in some ways.
Yeah, is this really a man chasing his sanity or to gain his sanity, kind of?
Exactly.
Okay.
I think, as per the name, the ladder is him kind of spiraling deeper into it, slipping down the ladder. Because so much of the atmosphere in the film is based on delusions, it's hard to tell what's really a clue and what's just a misdirection. Mainly, there is a nest of questions we have around his involvement in the war. Thematic parallels to Agent Orange are given, further pushing this kind of PTSD angle to the horror. But the movie pushes it all to the side pretty significantly at the last moments. And I really mean the very last moments. I wouldn't go so far to say that none of it mattered, but it was a bit unsatisfying to have these threads abandoned, especially when it was the best part of the horror. Mm-hmm. So without a doubt, folks, I think this is an even split between horror, drama, and mystery. And in such a horror-heavy week, could be the balance you're looking for. I think this was a very unique movie with so much done to capture dreamlike sequences that are more strange and startling than outright scary. And that odd tinge of what separates this film from so much other horror, that's what really makes it well worth your time. I'm going to go ahead and give Jacob's Ladder, 1990, a 71.
Oh, wow. Okay. Jumping in the 70s, that's a pretty good movie then.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot to love about that movie. It's just that, be warned, and again, I'd be happy to go into it if we covered spoilers, but...
You're being pulled in a lot of different directions.
Yes, and it feels like the answer or the resolution they chose... it felt a little unsatisfying. At least unsatisfying in comparison to the other threads that were unraveling.
How was Tim Robbins? Because I don't see him as some great actor, but he's really present in the 80s and 90s.
Oh, yeah. I can't say beyond like Shawshank, I would say, oh, you got to see this. But he does a good job here. And like I said, bringing up in comparison, I believe 2 years earlier with Bull Durham, he shows a lot of range here. This is a tortured PTSD, veteran type of role compared to just what he was just like some, like horny dumb jock.
Baseball. This came out 90, and I think, Bull Durham, I think, was 89?
88.
It was 88.
Maybe, yeah.
Okay, but anyway, right there.
Yeah. So I deleted it as a joke, but I was going to say a doubleheader is with Hurt Locker in this, with how much of a PTSD spin it has.
That's pretty good. 71% for Jacob's Ladder.
Yeah. Good movie.
That's awesome. And let's jump right away to 2011. And again, this one I had heard from you and other people. It's just like, no, don't sleep on this next one.
Yeah.
It's The Cabin in the Woods, directed by Drew Goddard. And how did you like it? Was this just going to be a typical schlock movie? We're in the 2000s. Is just going to be another one on the list, kind of? Or was there hype around this? Was it a big deal when it came out? Just tell us about it.
I think it was absolutely a massive deal when it came out, being in the same realm of Joss Whedon covering Avengers 1. This was a huge deal for Whedon. Folks, it's like I said, it's been a while since I mentioned this movie on the podcast, but I feel like it's an overdue entry to cover this month. One, because it wasn't actually rated on the back end scores.
Very surprising.
Two, I was really curious to go back and say, does this live up to the hype that it had in my head? So,
Josh Whedon, by the way, writer.
Yes, writer here, and then also Drew Goddard is a collaborator with him from his TV days with Buffy the Vampire Slayer and a few other pieces.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
I'll say this much: back when everyone liked Josh Whedon, back in the early 2010s, please write in, folks, if you can kind of explain him getting canceled, because it seems like he's just an asshole boss to me. But I'll leave that be. This came out as one of the freshest takes on horror, being a mix of meta-horror tropes that had a self-deprecating spin for its comedy. Watching this again in 2023, it felt more dated than expected. Honestly, I couldn't get it out of my mind that this almost felt like an early spoof horror movie from the early 2000s, but with a heavier emphasis on horror over comedy. Honestly, it's Whedon's writing that leaves a distinct stain on the film. We live in a post-Avenger, post-Justice League world. Josh Whedon's dialogue is... You've never heard that?
No.
That's how you distinguish Snyder Cut from original
of course,
Justice
okay.
League. That's Justice League. We live in a world where Joss Whedon's dialogue writing is honestly some of the most recognizable, not because he's getting all the jobs in the world, because of how it morphed superhero films and how they feel, coming off of Avengers and falling on its face with Justice League. My gut wants to say this movie falls in a good category, along with TV projects like Firefly and Buffy, and it's mostly because director Drew Goddard worked with him back then. But I was seriously torn on how this movie comes off to someone not in the know, and honestly, if it works or not. This was a challenge this week. I thought this was going to be an easy one, even to the point that I thought it was rated already, and I don't know, something about this, I was like, I'm not too sure. Almost that it was, my prior love for it, I kind of felt a little embarrassed by. I was like, wow, is this...
Thank God it wasn't rated then.
Yeah.
I mean, it must have been... I wonder when the last time you really watched it was.
Yeah, it had to be on release. It had to be on release in 2011, so...
I mean, that's going back.
Yeah.
And that's going back early, that's still kind of in the beginning of when a lot of movies started to get bad. And we get into the superhero thing, and you weren't used to Josh Whedon's writing back then.
Sure.
Where now,
really, it would be only off of Firefly,
right?
And loving him, but yeah.
Talk about diminishing returns.
Yeah, for real. For the summary here, I'm gonna give the goat away a bit more than I normally would, folks, and mainly because it's not really a twist to the movie, and secondly, the concept really is the best part. The concept, if there is a reason to watch The Cabin in the Woods, it's for the concept.
Okay.
And I to accurately recommend that, I need to dive a little bit into it. When I say Cabin in the Woods is a meta horror, it's because all possible horror legends, movie and otherwise, could possibly exist within it. We open on Richard Jenkins and Bradley Whitford, two dry office workers chatting meaninglessly. However, through their dialogue and context, we begin to understand the nature of their job may not be so benign. This massive facility they operate in is in charge of staging real horror events that mimic your average scary movie to real unsuspecting people. That group this time around is 5 teens falling into suspiciously typical roles, such as the jock played by Chris Hemsworth, the cheerleader, the nerd, and so on. But things may not go so smoothly this time because something so cliche as a cabin in the woods wouldn't fool anyone anymore. My best elevator pitch for this is that this is the Office Space of horror.
Okay.
It is, hell, that's actually, I'm realizing how long it's been since I've seen Office Space.
I'm going to go back and watch that one. Yeah, I like that a lot, though.
Yeah. It's like a, it's mundanity around horror. Our characters often are so self-aware of things that would typically happen in a horror that it allows them to talk about these concepts in kind of this droll, everyday type of way and creates a cynical comedic tone to it. But unlike a meta script that you would find in something like in the Scream franchise that kind of self-recognizes horror movies.
Sure.
This horror awareness is a lot more broad, and that's where the film gets exciting and isn't just like a remix of a Scream type of concept. I also think that if you view this movie as a comedy first and a horror second, that it makes up a little bit for the cringe I mentioned I was experiencing with the writing. I feel like go into this first as a comedy and you'll understand that I guess where I
it's really not trying to be a comedy in any, like, it is taking itself.
No, it's definitely comedic.
It's billed as a comedy.
Yeah,
okay, all right.
Yeah, because I mean, this whole Office side it's all about
It's
cracking
so ridiculous.
jokes.
Okay,
yeah, and at the expense of these victims and the horror. But yeah, I think that's the best way to kind of navigate around some possible, again, for lack of a better word, cringe that you would get with Whedon's writing style and Goddard's writing style as well. They're both writing on this. I really do think the Office side of this story is why it's worth your time. It's interesting unraveling how deep this organization goes, and it's funny having office workers sacrificing people in white-collar clothes and referring to it as, another day around the water cooler or something like that. There are many funny performances in the film, but Richard Jenkins specifically kills it in this. He has the same kind of exhausted tone as he has when he plays the dad in Step Brothers.
Yeah.
And this is coming off, very recently. That was probably his brand at the time. But it really is the best. He's so funny in this, and he's so good and plays to such a cynicism, such an assholeness to it. It's just so great. So great.
Is he in it enough to make it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, all right.
Absolutely. I mean, so much so that, again, for someone that hasn't seen this, the very opening scene are these office workers.
Right,
That's
right.
why I wouldn't consider it a spoiler. Yes, I'm giving away the concept a little bit more than I normally would.
It's so right there.
The very first scene
Yeah.
is you're around a water cooler and they're talking about, Japan's not doing that well this month or something like that. You know what I mean? So there's more to it, and it gives you that right away to pay attention to it. So I think it's a horror only for horror movie buffs, and a comedy for everyone else. And I think that's where my recommendation falls, to kind of balance things.
Okay.
A spooky comedy, certainly, but a comedy. There is enjoyment to be gained out of seeing references, but I think the movie works on a fun, absurd premise rather than actually being scary. I always thought this movie was rated on our side, folks, like I said, but it really turns out it wasn't. So this is a well overdue to get such a unique movie on the podcast, and give it a watch if you haven't before. We're going to go ahead and give The Cabin in the Woods 2011 a 68.
Okay, 68. We're not doing too bad this episode here.
Yeah, it's going well. It's going well.
Okay, I think a 68% is actually pretty good for that movie. I mean, like I said, I heard good things about it. I heard you talk about it before, but now that breakdown of it, it's 68's, I think, pretty good.
Yeah, for what it's worth, in my mind, I thought it was somewhere in the 70s, but low 70s.
Okay.
So, I mean, is it really splitting hairs over, a single-digit score difference? I don't know. But either way, though, I think watching it again, I don't know. There was just such a gut reaction.
Yeah, it's good that you were able to break that down.
Yeah.
The comedic versus actual horror aspects to it.
Yeah. And again, I'd be just very curious of someone that doesn't know Joss Whedon, only knows modern superhero films, watching this film and being like, wow, this is what is this dialogue? It's very quippy. It's very snarky. So I
would hate it.
Well, yeah, you might hate it. Yeah, you're probably gonna hate it. I mean, it's already an uphill battle for horror. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I kind of was thinking that this was a different movie as well.
Oh, okay.
So I kind of had this in my mind, but also a completely other movie in my mind as well. And then it ended up being The Strangers, the Liv Tyler one, and I hear very good things about that one as well.
Oh, yeah. I mean, A Cabin in the Woods as far as the trope of it, yeah.
I don't know if that's rated either, actually.
No, I've never seen that movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
All right. Well, next October then. One film I could be excited about that.
Right.
Listen, folks, before we move on to our new movies here in theaters, we just want to remind everybody that we are totally and completely producer supported. So basically, Vin and I will sit down and we host this show. We don't want to look at you as listeners. We would love to look at you all as producers. And how you can be a producer is you go to thedailyratings.com, you go to the donations tab, and through monetary support, you actually become a legit producer of the Daily Ratings. I mean, it's just like any executive producer, normal producer, associate producer. Well, I don't know about associate producer. Sometimes those guys just get coffee. But an executive producer, the point is you're financially supporting the show legitimately. Yeah. And any of you who do go to the Daily Ratings and throw us some money, we can't thank you enough for that. In the process of doing that, you can write a note with your donation and send it in. And this segment of the podcast right here, that's where we're actually going to read the note. So if you have comments and critiques or just, small commentary, we're going to read it. But also, it's your time to ask us questions if you have any, or provide any helpful tips, or the show, because you're a producer, could be shifted in a different way, or you think it would be better doing things this way.
Yeah.
We would love to hear that, honestly.
On the social medias, we had some engagement with people saying about a guest segment, where guest, opinions or thoughts on movies or anything like that. Guess what? It's already baked right into the show. As far as our engagement with you, we want to hear from you. We want to hear how the podcast is maybe changing how you're watching movies, but most importantly, what passion you have to the movies you watch on your own as well.
Absolutely. And it might sound like this is a Patreon, but this is not a Patreon thing, because Patreon is tier structures. We don't deal with tier structures because $100 to you could be way more for this person or a smaller amount for this person. If $5 is a lot of money to you, then you sending us $5 is a really big deal, and we appreciate that. So it's really whatever amount of value you feel you're getting from us, whether it be $20 a month, which you can do because there's monthlies, there's a weekly, or if it's just a one-time random number that you feel like you're getting from us this week or the past few weeks you've been listening, just go ahead and send that our way. That's the value for value way, kind of. And we want to stay away from corporate advertising or want to deal with advertisers. Advertising's been really weird and bad lately. And also, I've been noticing it more on podcasts I listen to.
Oh, sure.
And I got to tell you, it really breaks things up, and it's bad. It leaves a bad taste in your mouth. There's some very serious podcasts I listen to, and then just to be broken up and into an underwear ad or into the freaking Rough Greens ad for your dog food or this or that. And it's amazing how many of these podcast hosts are on the same exact medication. It's really not good. It doesn't make a good product, and we're all about doing the best product that we possibly can here for you. So any amount of money that you donate our way is a huge idea. So it's a value for value model. The idea is, are you finding this valuable at all? And that's value in your pocket. Could you send us some value back in our pocket? Again, it's thedailyratings.com, and you head to the donations tab. So it's right there on the homepage on mobile. It's up there in the top right corner of the screen if you're on desktop or something like that. And if you're interested in the newsletter comes out every Tuesday morning or late Monday night. And it's just your weekly movie news. There's a lot of other stuff in there that's kind of fun, but it's got some good stuff to click on, and we're not going to pitch products to you. Same deal. We're not going to flood you with advertising. It's just a great little newsletter every week. You can find that at the bottom of the website. You just put your name and email in, and you can get that every Tuesday morning. Again, it's dailyratings.com, and we thank you all so much. All right, Vin. So here we are, episode 104, newly released. Another 2 spookies, so let's do 10 first?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to go ahead and do Saw 10, directed by Kevin Greutert, I think.
Yeah.
And this one, I read 2 articles that it's getting a little bit of hype or that people are enjoying it. And how did you find it? And would you agree?
I don't know about enjoy. No. Folks, if there was another 10 spot to do this year, it was for James Wan's original baby, the undisputed king of 2000s, Saw. Each film is largely a different twist, a different mystery, a breadcrumb story stringing you along, and for my curiosity, we could possibly rank the VFX in each of the torture machines that come for the series. Then again, maybe they're all the same, and that's why we got away from.
Man,
that.
I can't believe it was 2000. We now have 23 years of Saw.
No, well, first one's 2004, I want to say.
Oh, okay, that makes a little bit more sense.
But of the 2000s,
Gotcha.
We have yearly releases pretty much until I want to say 2011. Like every year, there's another.
They were hitting
Saw.
really hard.
Yeah.
And was that all Juan heavy?
Juan is actually the only original one, and then he gets passed off.
Okay,
but
gotcha.
if anything, I mean, it shows how James Wan is a kind of an horror IP machine that he kind of just pumps them out, creates them, and then lets them run.
Lets it go.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
But like I said in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre review, like Exorcist this episode, I didn't want to watch series. I wanted to watch a variety of horror, preferably new ones, preferably getting them off my list. Way back when, my history with this is the original in 2004. I want to say maybe early 2010s. I checked out the original trilogy out of curiosity, and I was just kind of shocked with the quality drop-off of these yearly releases as they go. I mean, that first one is pretty good, but man, do they just get progressively really bad.
It's kind of surprising because
Yeah.
I think they do well financially, so I feel like they would
sure.
up it a little bit. Even Insidious has gone up just a tiny bit.
Sure.
For money.
Yeah. Sometime later, I watched 2017's Jigsaw on a date that was pretty boring. I rated this on our side with a whopping 32. The date I would give a 55 probably. And I feel that I was the most curious for the series in 2021 with Spiral coming out. And there was an attempt at flirting with more storytelling outside of the torture porn that comes with this series. But apparently that movie is hated by fans and non-fans alike, so go figure.
Okay.
And I never saw Spiral. So that's the brief history with the Saw franchise. In Saw X, the timeline of Jigsaw's life is stretched so thin that we jump back to much earlier in his bloody legacy. And this tells the story of Jigsaw getting cancer and being swindled by a group of scammers, giving him the targets for his latest God complex ego trip. More of a direct spotlight means more time with some solid acting with Tobin Bell. And I really do want to mean that. I mean, Tobin does a great job as Jigsaw. He's menacing, he's compelling to watch on screen, and this has a huge amount of time with him.
Okay.
If anything, to a little bit of a detriment that I'll get into in just a moment.
And has he been the guy?
Oh, yeah, he's Jigsaw.
Okay, but I mean, for 10 episodes, that's what I'm saying.
We're going to get into slight spoilers for Saw. In and out, Jigsaw passes away at some point in the series, and then he has copycat killers. Yeah, so.
It's the whole thing.
Yeah. It's a whole thing. That's actually a great mile marker for how much you are not a horror fan that you didn't know that. Yeah. That's really fantastic. He's just doing a great job being the most menacing civil engineer imaginable. Folks, if I had to chart the quality and my interest in this story for Saw 10, it would be a steady sloped decline, however. The longer this movie goes on, the less creative it gets, and almost on every single front gets just worse and worse. I gotta be honest, I think the positive reception online of this is absolutely fueled by this being more of a fan film than other Saw entries.
Okay.
This is kind of telling a black spot, or a blind spot rather, in Jigsaw's history. I think the objective of this film was giving fans what they thought they wanted. For me, not as a fan, but still appreciative of Saw's horror. I thought this was not good. This just this
Really?
got
Just
weaker
straight up?
and almost compounding weaker and weaker and weaker as it goes on. It just continued to make a mess of its own story, of the twist, and even getting weaker on VFX and things like that.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. I wasn't surprising that. I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah. And Tom, I like to stay away from as much critique as possible, but this movie, I mean, it is boring. It is It is very boring in how the mystery unfolds. There's just way too much talking. Things are laid out without any need for imagination or puzzling it together. Probably worst of all, flashbacks happen for lines that were said less than 10 minutes ago. Like, I kid you not. Like, what do they think of the teenage crowd? Are they goldfish? Like, how could they not remember what happened moments ago?
Okay.
And any allure towards the mystery is set on cruise control the moment the main death traps kick in, with far too much exposition given to criminal victims. The victims that are in these death traps, they're just like way too in the know. The horror needs to be concocted by fear of the unknown and fear of
totally
who is this?
cluelessness.
Yeah, exactly. This kind of revenge plot of Jigsaw very specifically getting back at people that have done him wrong directly, rather than in other Saw movies, it's always punishing in kind of this like God complex of people that are doing wrong, but not connected to Jigsaw in any way.
Right.
Them having beef is the Achilles heel of this film. It just
That's a great point, actually. Yeah.
it just removes it all the allure of that type of mystery. And going back to Saw 1, that's what it all is all about. Saw 1 is so good is because it's connected to its mystery and piecing that together. The movie also leans into this vigilante angle more than ever, to the point that it muddies the finale in such a blah end to the film. This is where again it was a compounding slope. There was it got faster and faster towards the decline. It really was ridiculous. The story just has so much runtime, making Jigsaw empathetic in some way, that it lessens the terror and the pacing of the games he plays. There were also countless moral conversations thrown in behind the death traps that it just flat out weakened the raw, vicious appeal of seeing the gore on screen. There was just nothing there to leave to the imagination. It's the same way that these flashbacks just kind of came up every 10 seconds on the screen.
So was it more than just... It seems like it was more than just pacing was an issue, although it seemed like a big issue.
Yeah, no. It's how information is revealed.
Yeah.
It's how the mystery is laid out on high beams. It's
a little messy.
Yeah. It's muddy because it has this focus that Jigsaw is almost like an anti-hero in this film.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that can very much play into people that want to see only Jigsaw. Guess what? That's, you're getting what you want on screen, but I feel like it hurts the horror. And what is Saw but a horror? You know what I mean? Like, it's got nothing else for it. It's the gore fest. So it's the gore fest. But I'll say we get a lot of mileage out of our director being a longtime editor for the series. Many scenes will be dead simple and are elevated by a fast barrage of techniques to sell the horror of the machines. The VFX around the torture machines is initially great. I really enjoyed how dark some of the death traps were and almost had this unique kind of industrial punk design to it. This is featured very prominently on the poster of the movie, this kind of crossing vacuum tubes being a nightmarish silhouette. Sadly, because of the setting and because of the setup of the story, the torture gets less and less creative as we go on. Jigsaw is in this revenge plot, so he really slaps together his arena fast to get back at the people before they get away. And as the movie goes on, it loses points where it counts most. Creative, fun traps are exchanged for more brutally simple designs, which only continue to lose me. When the traps boil down to some chains being hung from a construction machine...
So you were especially walking into it with the 10th one thinking you were going to get some well thought out crazy stuff that you couldn't imagine, basically.
Yeah, and you get that initially. These few that are a little bit more, I guess, produced, you could say, more complex and more nightmarish as a result. They happen in Jigsaw's mind in the beginning. He's kind of fantasizing about doing this to a kid that he sees stealing a watch or something like that. Again, this, his God complex is always running. When it comes down to that, those like imaginary death machines were great. They looked awesome. They looked produced. They're, they have the appeal of Saw death traps. That's like, why is this so complicated? What, like, and that's where, questions are asked from the audience and characters. All of that is robbed by more exposition, more information for this kind of revenge story. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it sounds like they're doing. It sounds like they're trying to do way too much when they need to boil it down to a much simpler plot.
Yeah.
And just have more unique, interesting, and crazy contraptions.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely more unique contraptions, because I think they're just so simple. It's just like, it's not even inventive from a VFX type of thing. Like I said in the beginning of this review, if there was any skin in the game for me watching 10 of these movies, it was to scratch an itch of like, hey, what's the best trap? What's the best death trap?
Oh, that's kind of cool. Yeah.
How do the VFX get better? How do they get worse? From a film production standpoint, this would be close to the bottom for that reason, because they're just so like, I don't know.
It's an interesting point to how it's funny how they work it into the story of like, oh, he had a rush.
Yeah.
Like he was in a rush.
He just has to get to a construction yard and he's like, all right, I got to get these people here. So it's just like, yeah. I mean, story-wise, I guess it makes sense that they're simpler.
Right. But it's laziness. It comes across as lazy.
Yeah, exactly. It feels lazy, and it robs what I think is, one of the better qualities of the series. So it's a real shame. This movie goes from pretty good to not that good to kind of bad. Seriously, it kind of went down in chunks of 10 for me as I was watching this. So, and all of it is pretty much connected to this muddy ethics in trying to make Jigsaw this anti-hero. The best part of this movie is its Achilles heel. As a result of being with Jigsaw more, traps are less inventive, the mystery is delivered with high beams on, and worst of all, this straightforward gore fest gets its priorities confused. We're going to go ahead and give Saw 10 a 44.
Oh my gosh, 44. Okay, really not doing it for you.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that this was getting like 80s, granted, the curve is different. Yeah.
That really surprised me. I mean, the one article I read was talking about like, oh, this is the first, finally, after 10 movies, this is the first Saw that's critically praised or something, or has opportunity for like awards and stuff.
Right.
Okay, wow.
Right. Right.
44% does not do it, though. All right, so I'm glad we covered that first. Let's go on to the one that's really anticipated. This is The Exorcist Believer, in theaters now. This is kind of a big deal. The original director just passed away this year.
Yes.
His last movie coming out this year. And let's just get into it right away.
Sure.
You were not excited for this film.
No.
No one was really asking for the film?
Definitely not.
Is it a special anniversary and that's why it's coming out in 23?
Possibly. There's a good mounting reasons of why this is the case, but Universal seems to have grabbed the license for it and partnered with Blumhouse to pump out a new trilogy. So
yes, so I knew about the trilogy.
Yeah.
Okay. So
we'll see where that lands now, but yeah, we'll see.
All right, let's dive into it then. Why was this bad?
Yeah. I think it's a good bit bad because no one asked for it, for sure. That kind of plays into it. As much as this year has been covering the tail end of massive series, this is actually the start of a new trilogy being pushed out by Universal, and an emphasis on being pushed because with production partners like Blumhouse, who needs friends? They're just going to pump it out anyway. The critical
That's
reception.
disappointing.
Yeah, you're telling me.
They should have partnered with like A24.
Oh yeah,
that would have been cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The critical reception of this film is dragged through the mud. And I tried to stay away from a lot of this, as with Saw. And it just makes me wonder if, this is going to be abandoned now with so much hate for the reboot before it even gets out of the gate.
Yeah,
really.
I did read some of that.
Yeah. Right now, it's only announced that you have the sequel, Exorcist Deceiver, I think it's called. Not a fan of
Not
it.
a fan. Can't say I'm excited.
So we'll see. Maybe it'll just be a two-parter. I don't know. We'll see. David Gordon Green is kind of the best guy for the job, though, all things considered, with a stacked resume, folks. Green has just come off of his moderately successful Halloween reboot trilogy, going from 2018 to 2022. So I guess the next logical step is him trying to do the same thing with yet another iconic horror franchise. You just kind of move on to the next one. He's like, what came out in the 70s? Oh, yeah, okay. all right, yeah. We're doing Exorcist. Mind-blowingly, we will see him pop up again with Pineapple Express when we return to the Apatow study.
Did he write?
He directed, he wrote.
Oh, he directed it?
Yeah. David Gordon Green was a comedic director. Among the writing team for this and that Halloween sequel trilogy is the comedic actor Danny McBride, believe it or not. Yeah.
Danny McBride did not do The Exorcist, though, right? Or he only did the Halloween reboots?
No, he's on this writing team as well.
Oh, no. I love Danny McBride.
Yeah.
I went from not liking him to, I think he's one of the more funnier guys in the past 15 years.
Absolutely.
I didn't know he was helping with the screenplay on the new Exorcist film.
Yeah, and he was all attached to the 3 Halloween movies that came out. Looking back, you can actually see their collaboration goes deep with some of McBride's biggest hits like Eastbound and Down and Righteous Gemstones.
First season's great, by the way.
Sure.
At Gemstones.
Fingers crossed we can get back to David Gordon Green in his element. Mm-hmm. I think it's, like I said, there's almost no better man for the job if someone's really going to tackle this idea, because I'm not a fan of the Halloween franchise. Those trilogies were kind of spotty, but for the most part, fans like them. Hopefully his element is in comedy, and we can see that with Danny McBride. In The Exorcist Believer, we see 2 girls from different sides of the tracks go missing and spawns a frantic 3-day search to find them. Right when the tension between the families is at its highest, the children are suddenly found seemingly unharmed, if a bit traumatized. But the truth couldn't be further, as these little girls carry a dark presence with them that will test their bonds and create a scramble to look for answers for anyone that can give them. And I really mean anyone. We'll get to that in a second. I'll always praise the original Exorcist for its brilliant split focus. And it's really why it lands on a must-watch for me. First half is structured like a medical drama, and then as a last resort, something darker is considered. In a direct nod, here we have the first portion structured like a missing child case, and even a similar medical drama once the girls are found. This was a great sign that the film understood what worked so well in the original. I mean, I really was watching the first half of this film, I said, wow.
They were matching.
They know what's up.
Yeah,
they are aware of what is specifically great, if not all-time great, about The Exorcist. This kind of misdirection allows the horror to creep in without getting stale. It's not going to overstay its welcome, and by the halfway mark, then they can clock up the horror to unreal highs, and that's how you get Exorcist being one of the most landmark movies ever to be released, horror or otherwise.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm sorry to say, however, that every ounce of what works in the first half goes out the window in the second half. I mean, it is the most not stick the landing I've ever experienced, maybe. I mean, it is ridiculous how it's just out the window, folks. The Exorcist franchise is a bit of an oddball in that the original sequels were not at all rehashes. They weren't just like, oh, let's do The Exorcist again. They were all kind of just bold new directions that just didn't work. Here we have the opposite, with nods to the original being a burden for the story. Much like Green's Halloween sequel trilogy, nostalgia for the franchise is handled by looping in original characters again. And hey, I'm not trying to take Jamie Lee Curtis out of a job or Ellen Burstyn out of a job, but the inclusion of Ellen Burstyn in this as the mother from the original is a definitive timestamp on when this movie starts to get really, really bad.
Oh, no, really?
Yeah.
I thought bringing her in was going to be, such an awesome thing, especially for the fans. It was going to be, epic. I did. I thought it was this I like.
Yeah, not the case. Granted, I think that's what was so successful about his Halloween trilogy, that it was kind of just calling back to very specifically Halloween 1.
Right.
And that's, you're exactly right. I think that's what fans wanted to see. But here, not necessarily connected to Burstyn specifically, because she's really not around that long. Let me tell you, it's just such a perfect mark of when things start to go south for this film, and where all this hate online comes in. On top of her inclusion being pointless, it starts a downward spiral of what becomes the focus for the finale. By this point, the story has slowly peppered in characters from many different faiths. We have kind of like a Southern Baptist type style guy. There is a voodoo alternative medicine girl. There's a normal Catholic priest. There's just a spiritual guy. There's a lot thrown in there for supporting characters. And initially, I enjoyed this. Characters were scrambling for answers anywhere they could get them. That, honestly, is, again, the root of what makes Exorcist 1 work. However, this makes the third act of the film extremely unfocused, as we don't have a singular grasp on what the rules of the demon are. And the actual exorcism is, believe it or not, Tom, a rallying of all spiritualism and all religions in like a Avengers style.
Yeah, the Faith Avengers.
Yeah, the Faith Avengers.
Oh, this sounds terrible.
Yeah. I kid you not. It's maybe not specifically Avengers, but it is a team up story arc. It's people of different backgrounds coming together to overcome. It's
different
comic
faiths,
bookish.
like people.
Yep.
It is.
Yep.
Oh my God, it would be cool.
And taking turns on the exorcism, and it's just like, this is the worst. This is so bad. Don't get me wrong, folks. This is like
Pokemon trying to take down like the big bad guy.
like
It's like
Mewtwo or some shit.
Yeah. It's like, oh, my
Pikachu
ability
teaming
doesn't
up.
work for this, but you need to do your thing. You should match each of the faith people with either a Pokemon or an Avenger.
Absolutely.
Who's Iron Man?
Absolutely. And it's also so bad because clearly, like, some of them have lesser things to do. Like that Southern Baptist guy, he's just like in the background. He's just like,
he's like Ant-Man.
Yeah. Like, come on. It still does like some of these supporting characters dirty.
Oh my God, that's really funny.
Yeah.
To see this movie now.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. This type of kumbaya approach between all the religions weakens the focus of the horror and felt very cartoonish. Even if it doesn't feel cartoonish, folks, it weakens what the horror needs to be focused on. The whole point in my praise of, wow, they understood the structure, the skeleton of Exorcist 1 so well. It means nothing if when they have to clock up the horror, horror's not there. The plug's not in.
Really, just kind of falls flat.
Yeah. I'm not saying this has to be Catholic or bust, but a singular focus. I know, yeah. Go back to Pope's Exorcist. Right. I need some cool Catholic in this. I'm not saying it has to be one religion or bust or anything like that, but what you get with that is a singular focus that allows anticipation to build around the demon. Flashback to our zombie special episode, and you will see learning the rules of the monster is how fear is translated to us as the audience. We need to know the fact that these 6+ people in a room are just quite literally throwing different, spiritual tactics at the wall and seeing what sticks with these two little girls is not scary. It's like, I don't know, it's kind of problem solving.
It is, yeah.
It's not scary at all.
And it's Exorcist Pokemon. That's what this is. I can't get out of my head now.
Spirit Pokemon. Yeah. That's great. As a result, the stakes are so poorly communicated, and the entire film really isn't scary. Unbelievably, Green has created a film that understands the DNA of what makes the original an all-time great, and I really mean that. It's a tragedy how the dominoes are set up near perfectly, or as perfect as they could be in the first hour of the film, and doesn't even come close to sticking the landing. We're going to go ahead and give The Exorcist Believer Believe it, it's a 29.
What?
Yeah, believe the hype on this one.
It's that bad?
Yeah, it's really not good.
I did not think it was going to be. Just how could you botch it? You have such. You
Right.
have such an important IP.
Right.
29. We are in a sliding scale here. Did you know that? We don't have many of these.
As I was describing how Saw 10 felt, I realized that the episode as well mimicked that.
Wow, a 29% is really, really bad. To the extent where if contracts are signed and things are in the works already for Universal, I mean, God knows, hey, what's the one? Was it HBO or Warner Brothers, whatever? They were willing to cut in an entire Batman movie?
Yeah.
Or the, what movie did they cut? No, Catwoman movie.
Oh, maybe.
Right? Didn't they cut it? Michael Keaton was in it, and Brendan Fraser was in it, and they cut it completely.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe. I mean, I know there was a lot of casualties in the DCU falling. So
Yeah, no, it was that movie was going to be so terrible that they just cut it. What the hell movie was that? Anyway, the point is because you can just tank a movie and then you're going to get some at least insurance money back.
Sure.
So, for instance, the latest Mission Possible ended up getting close to, I think, actually breaking even at least.
Oh, really?
Because
Okay.
they got so much money back due to insurance reasons, still coming off of COVID stuff.
Oh, very interesting.
And affected things in that nature.
Yeah.
But anyway,
certainly Blumhouse is no stranger to just pumping it out and
schlock.
Regardless.
This was Blumhouse schlock. Once
know.
again, 29%.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, because you have a big boy like Universal,
Yep.
and because you might have already had things in place because it was already supposed to be a trilogy, maybe it's a good thing that this is so bad.
Yeah.
Because this guy and this team is going to be beaten down so much
Right.
that they're going to have to listen to the fans on this one.
Sure,
and
but-
make all kinds of corrections.
Yeah.
And say clearly the direction we want to go doesn't work. And if it's this bad, then they can you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think all things said, or all things considered, Deceiver or whatever the sequel will be called. I mean, I think it might be even better if it's just kind of a 1-2. You know, what I didn't find much sequel bait in this movie, believe it or not, and I can't believe
that's
I'm
good.
saying that in the year of cliffhangers that
Right.
is 2023. You know,
Which is a good thing.
Yeah,
It's just the same that last hour tanked that film so bad for you.
it's tanked the film because it was perfect build up,
Right.
and then did nothing with it,
Very weird.
Yeah, and just
So Believer and then Deceiver. And 3 will be Achiever. That's what I think.
I love it. Exorcist Achiever.
And then it'll just be a comedy.
Yeah, because anyone can achieve it.
I like that actually. And it could just be a full-on comedy then if you want it to be. Okay, 29%, Vin. Listen, man, looking at all these scores here, anything you want to touch on, talk about in the future, or roll credits here?
Oh, just watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It was so good. It was so simple and so actually scary. We've been talking about this for a minute now on the podcast, but I'm not expecting to walk into horror movies to actually get scared. I am a grown man now.
Right.
I can separate almost every element out of actually being scared.
Especially post-podcast.
Yeah. And right, exactly. Because of how many movies I'm watching as well.
Yeah.
But the fact that Texas Chainsaw actually kind of got me a little bit.
Oh.
It was so weird and strange and disturbing, and man, I was in love with that film, and happy to say that out of watching, yet another October with so much horror, that something that good came out of it. That's the juice for the squeeze.
Yeah, we just had to go back 49 years basically.
Yeah.
And go back 50 years because it is the 50th anniversary of Exorcist.
Oh,
as
yeah,
well.
yeah.
And boy, rest in peace, William Friedkin. Sorry that this.
Oh yeah.
I
know.
By the way, the movie that came out at post. So he finished the film in entirety.
Okay,
and
I wasn't aware of this.
Yeah, he came out with another film this year, and he passed away, but it was all done, and it just debuted at one of the major film festivals, one of those big fall festivals.
Okay.
I forget if it was Telluride or TIFF.
TIFF?
It might have been TIFF.
Yep, Toronto.
You have no idea what it is?
No.
It is the Kane Mutiny court martial.
No! This is worse than Heat 2! Oh my god.
And I think it might come out this year. So we have another Kane Mutiny to do.
That's great.
And it's literally a take on the old Kane Mutiny, I believe.
Oh, sure. I could imagine.
All right, Vin. Vin, thank you for this spooky week here. This was enjoyable. Yeah. And I'm glad you had some goodies in here.
I'm glad it was, Tom.
We've got a great episode coming next week, too. And I think, Vin and I just put together a little list, and I think it's kind of be good to push it out. Again, we've done 3 Octobers. This is kind of a genre we've hit really hard. We think you're just going to like next week. Okay, we're going to run this down one more time here. We have the Texas Chainsaw Massacre with an 86%, Jacob's Ladder with a 71, The Cabin in the Woods with a 68, Saw 10 with a 44, and finally, The Exorcist Believer with a 29%. Folks, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week on the Daily Ratings Podcast. Hey, if you enjoyed the podcast, if you would, give us a good rating or tell a friend about us. If you're wondering if a film is worth a watch, or if you'd just like to see more movie ratings from Vince, be sure to stop by thedailyratings.com, where we have our ever-expanding catalog of films. Also, if you found value in the podcast or our site, become a producer and go to the donations tab on thedailyratings.com. You can donate whatever amount of value you feel you need from us. We're looking to build this into something large and great, folks, but we also really want to be independent from all those corporate sponsors. So we greatly appreciate any support from you all. So thanks so much, and we'll see you next time on the Daily Ratings Podcast.